I originally tried to write a script for this video, but honestly, the more that I talked about it, the more that it just kind of felt a little contrived and not like I was getting some real points across. Like I was trying to make it a lot more history based, and I feel like that was too much. But basically, I've gotten a couple comments, and I'm just going to point out a couple to you, a couple of them here to you. Um, I've gotten them across multiple videos, but this one was specifically about reworking. I do a lot of rework discussion on this channel, ideas, everything like that. And some of these comments have really got me thinking about, the place of reworks nowadays in modern Overwatch, and if they are even like a good thing. So I'm gonna show two of them to you here. This first one, we've reached the point where we are considering reworking Ryan and Mercy, two of the oldest, most simple to play fan favorite characters, rather than simply going back to 6v6, absolutely ridiculous. Excuse me. And this one, we're at the point where we are thinking of reworking Reinhardt. When is this insanity going to end? When are the devs going to admit that 5v5 was a horrible move? And when will we go back to the 6v6, the better format? Nice video, but it's just ridiculous that we have to rework every hero, go through every flavor of the month just for the game to still be miserable because 5v5 is not fixable. Hopefully the devs revert back to the better 6v6 format. For the record, the video was not about that we want every character to be reworked. In fact, at the end of the day, it was a section of them, and most of them we just wanted some minor changes or nothing at all. But there is still a good amount of them that we do think probably need some kind of help in some form or fashion and like significant upgrades to their kit. But basically, comments like this or others about it, basically saying that kind of like blaming 5v5, saying that 5v5 is the reason why we feel like we need to have these reworks, and it's a lot of work. And I feel like that's true. Like, it is a lot of work to go through every single character and going like what needs changes, and then also implementing those changes, thinking about them, all of that big stuff. It is a big, massive endeavor. But I wanted to talk about the point of reworks because I think it's been a little misconstrued that the only reason characters get reworks is because they no longer fit the formula, right? We've gone to 5v5 and some characters were just better suited for the 6v6 formula, right? And sure, I think that is true, but when we really look at the reworks that have happened in Overwatch 2, which there are a handful of them, I don't think they really cared that it was 5v5. I don't think the primary goal for most of them was to make them work in 5v5. I think the primary goal was to make those characters more fun and less frustrating. And we'll go ahead, we'll go through them, right? So which characters got, or I guess say less frustrating, they need these characters that needed to be modernized, that their design was a little outdated, right? So think about, I think Bastion is a great example, right? Bastion is a hero who was in the original beta, like alphas even, showed off the turret character, right? He just goes in and he stays in one spot and is a turret, right? That kind of character design, that defensive, that's just we thought of a machine gun character, one who's just going to stay still and transform and do all of that. That was from a very, very, very early days concept of Bastion. And don't forget that Bastion was even reworked with the self-heal eventually. He played a little differently because they did kind of rework him, which we'll get to that in a second. But, Bastion, he's old as dirt design that just doesn't fit Overwatch. He was never effective in Overwatch 1. He was always a pub stomper and was really bad at doing it. And nowadays, they decided for Overwatch 2 that they wanted him to be able to do more things. Because Bastion was really bad because he had no room to work. He was very, very niche, hyper niche, even for Overwatch 1, where niche was a lot like better and could be counteracted by other characters on the field. Bastion required so many resources and was just this incredibly frustrating design that was just not fun, not good, that he got reworked, right? Bastion, old as dirt character. Sombra is a similar thing. Sombra got reworked for Overwatch 1, partial or for 2, partially because in Overwatch 1, there was more to make up for the 5-second hack, but at the end of the day, 5-second hack never ever felt fun. In fact, whatever the lockout even is, like 1.8 or something weird, it also still doesn't feel fun. And Sombra, you know what I mean? Basically, I don't think that these characters, Doomfist, same thing. Doomfist got reworked to be a tank. One, to help just give, tanks another option just because there were less tanks overall. But two, because DPS Doomfist was so polarizing. He was a super, one shot from the rafters character. He was just super. He was such a caricature of what I think the idea of his design wanted to be. He was based off fighting games. You were supposed to have combos, but really a lot of it just came down to just one-shotting people and leaving. He's a CC demon. He's hard to catch, but he was also just kind of worthless, and he got moved over to the tank role. And of course, Overwatch 2 has had a couple of redesigns here and there, but you may have noticed that some of those characters, Sombra and Bastion, were reworked before, to varying degrees, right? Sombra, when she first launched, just wasn't very good, and her kit didn't really work, and it was just really weird. So they gave her the perma invis and everything, and then when she got to Overwatch 2, she got reworked again, and when later on in Overwatch 2, she got reworked again. Bastion, I'm not going to call him a rework because it was an alpha or whatever, but Bastion used to have a shield, and then he had what he had, and then he got better with the self heal and all of that. He did play a little differently since he was able to help himself, and he had also the damage reduction in the turret form. But basically the point I'm getting at with this is that most of the reworks ever in Overwatch 1 or 2 were not in reaction to any major shifts in how the game played. They were really just in reaction to these kits that were just kind of outdated or didn't function as the game progressed. So, as we as a community figure out how to play the game, and we understand the meta, and we kind of figure out what we like and what we don't like out of characters, some characters are going to fall behind, especially some these really old characters, right? This game was resurrected from the bones of Titan, and a lot of these characters were just classes that were supposed to be in a MOBA and kind of stitched together. And Overwatch was not even really meant to be a competitive game. It was just this was a multiplayer shooter that we made. Go have fun. And as the game progressed and everyone got better, how the game played evolved. And that's when you reevaluate and you go, okay, now that we know that this is how the game plays and this is what we value from the game, do these characters exemplify what we value? And if that answer is no, then I think they're in a great spot to be looked at for a rework. And those values I think are probably not very frustrating to play against, because I don't think that was even considered when they made Overwatch initially. Who even cares, right? The game is so not figured out what even is frustrating, what isn't. Do they have a lot of decision making, and are they fun to play, right? I feel like this is a big one. Are they fun to play? Back in the day, I think launch Overwatch, you could have fun with any character in the launch Overwatch roster. If you were to have all of those right now, I feel like if nothing were changed, right? We had the original roster. With how we play the game now, right? If we were if I'm 15 years old, I could pick up any character. I picked up Torb in the beta, and I loved Torb. In the one match I played in the beta, I had the most fun I'd ever had playing a video game when I played Torb at that time. I played Torb nowadays, even after he's been reworked. I think the character is boring as hell. And he was even more boring and weird before he got reworked. So like the way that we play the game has changed, and the things that we value have changed. So that's why we think about when things are reworked. Overwatch 2 has had a lot of reworks so far, but I think that it's just as the game progresses and it plays different and we learn about it more, especially since Overwatch 2, we've had it for about a year and a half, and I think the metas are really starting to define themselves on what characters are time and time again show up on the good list and the ones that we like seeing. You know, these Lucios, Tracers. I I think Sojourn and Kiriko, I know maybe a less popular opinion, but I like seeing those high skilled characters, high skill ceiling, um, characters that on paper have big weaknesses, although I think in practice sometimes could be tuned down. You know, Winston's, I like Doomfist a lot, these versatile, high skill characters, right? That's why when I do my rework discussions, that's what I want to push more characters towards, because the designs that we want to strive towards, you know, like the things that we value in this game have shifted from the initial concepts of Overwatch. And plenty of characters, especially in the early days of Overwatch, like the first year or two, so many characters got reworked in that time. Sombra, Mercy, Reaper, Torbjorn, Symmetra twice, Bastion, there, Diva. You know, like there's so many examples, because as they started playing the game, they realized that other characters are going to need some help to keep up with how the game has evolved, and they were perfectly fine doing that. And I don't think that's any different nowadays. I don't think the format matters at all. I don't think it ever has, right? You know, even in Overwatch 2, if you think about the characters that were changed, Roadhog, I'm not going to count Ball because they barely called it a rework. Sombra again. I feel like I'm missing some, and of course, like Orisa and Doomfist. Um, those characters were just really frustrating. Like Hog got reworked not to work better in the 5v5, but just to not be as oppressive and hard to deal with. And I think the success of that was not great. But Sombra also was the same thing. They reworked her in her second rework to make her more fun to play. And because Sombra like wasn't fun to play, it was hard to find value, and her uptime was really low unless you were like super duper good with her. And that was just it was hard, and so they kept this character that is still like in theory hard to play, but much more fun and more consistent, um at least for everyone, and still has a very high skill ceiling, and like that's what they want out of Sombra. So basically what I'm trying to say is like this has kind of gotten a little ranty and a little just all over the place, but it is good that we constantly, every once in a while, should look at the roster and be like, who doesn't fit in anymore? Who do we not like? Or like who do we not like the skills of these heroes and the playstyle of these heroes? What do we not value anymore? What have we changed to? How do we make characters fit in better? I feel like this has nothing to do with 5v5. If you had all these reworks in 5v5 still, like every character would still work just like they used to. Hog would still work, Sombra would still work, Doomfist would still work. You know what I mean? Like nothing in here is inherently because of 5v5. Sure, it's a perk for them to work better, especially for a tank to work better in 5v5. But like Ori, I think still like even if you never reworked her, she still probably works decently well in 5v5. It would be a different playstyle, sure, but the reason they changed her is because they didn't want to have that boring sit behind shield and do nothing playstyle. They had other characters, they just kind of like shifted their power to work in the tank role and not shift their whole kit. And to go back to all these comments, the ones that sparked this video, when I see things saying like, "Oh, we are considering reworking the original simple characters that people love, and I am going to exclude Mercy because it's very silly to suggest that Mercy should never be reworked when she was already reworked in the past. And if you, depending on your definition of a rework, she might have been reworked multiple times. So I'm going to ignore that. But like Reinhardt, I think it is worth evaluating if Reinhardt should be reworked. Again, I don't think he should be, and I think he can be helped without a full rework, or really without even changing that much about him. But I do think it is viable or valuable to look at the roster critically, everyone. Not, you know what, there's very few examples that I would never ever look at for reworks, right? Like, I'm not going to look at Lucio, I'm not going to look at Tracer, I'm not even going to look at Winston, right? But most characters, we have to look at everything and what we value, and specifically, what does the Overwatch team also value? Because that helps us determine, we can figure out early, like, what would they change? What characters are they looking at based on what they've done in the past? Because a lot of it is based off of our feedback. So I'm going to probably wrap this up here, but I did just want to like point that out there, that reworks are not necessarily signs of the game failing, because it really is just a sign of the game evolving and the people who play it. I'm gonna actually give another example real quick about a thing that universally praised, I believe, and please correct me if this is not true, but this is from an outsider looking in with a lot of people who play this game. In League of Legends, they have nearly 200 champions, and the game is older than Overwatch. Some of those characters are old as dirt, and their kits are just so weird and don't function with modern League anymore, because League has, it hasn't even changed that much. Like, obviously it has, but everyone, they still play on the same map. Generally things are the same. There are definitely system mechanics and things, and I think all the little details in League matter more than all the little details in Overwatch. But basically what they have been doing recently is that they have been taking polls every single year about what champions need to get reworked, and then they do that. I think Skarner was the most recent one that they just reworked. But this is like something that the League community has understood that just needs to happen. That these characters are old and they don't really function like how the game demands them to, because of how the meta is shifted and how people interact with the game. They just are left behind. So they need to be reworked. It's not anything wrong with the game of League of Legends. I don't like League, but that's besides the point, right? There's nothing wrong with how League has evolved and how people changed it. It's just that some of these characters didn't, they don't evolve with the game, so they need to be helped. And it is a healthy part of the life cycle to go look at characters and see who needs to be reworked, who needs help, how do we shift this character into something that works better for the game and the people who play it. And I think we need to kind of take that mindset as Overwatch players and apply that, It's the same thing with, how the map reworks, but like when they said like, hey, we're going to take a season to devote to map reworks, and everyone's like, that's great. Some of these maps are not great and we don't like them, right? And some of them are from the original launch and some of them aren't. It doesn't really matter. Sometimes the design phase, they kind of go off the walls. And that's great. I would totally be okay if they took the time and were like, hey, maybe we're not going to do a full new hero this season, but look, we're going to have an old hero rework, because like a full, like really put a lot of effort in and change this hero. And I feel like that would go down really well. Now, I know a lot of people are very character loyalist, and all change is kind of scary, but at the end of the day, I do think reworks are good and they should happen. And it does suck when, things you like go away. But if a rework is successful, all the things that you like should still be there, and the things that are bad should be gone. And, we can talk about that. I mean, I don't like the Roadhog rework, but, whatever. But yeah, that's basically it. I feel like the reworking characters should just be a natural part of the life cycle of the game rather than this thing that is somehow perceived as the game being bad. Because we are lucky that the devs are even updating the game anymore and that we can give them this feedback and look for new designs and look for updated character stuff. Because we could be left with a game that they aren't touching and we are just here like we have to just deal with this stuff forever. It's always going to be in our game when that doesn't have to be the case. So bring up TF2. I know nothing about TF2. I cannot. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end it here. I'll film an outro later. And this is me filming that outro. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please feel free to leave a comment about this topic or do any of the other good YouTube stuff like subscribe. It does really help me out. I do listen to your feedback and I do read most of the comments, assuming that there aren't too many. Otherwise, if you want to get on these discussions live, that's going to be twitch.tv/LaneHemingway. I try to do a discussion every single time I go live, something about Overwatch, always something to talk about. If not, the rest of my socials are down below. Thank you so much for watching and have a good day.